Today we're going to talk about something that's really sensitive but also incredibly important. And that's the unique and often really misunderstood grief that comes after terminating a pregnancy because of a fetal anomaly, or TOPFA. So let's dive into this complex emotional world together to try and get a better handle on the experience and what support can look like.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the basics. What exactly is prolonged grief? From there, we'll get into what makes TOPFA so unique. We're also going to spend some time on the often overlooked experience of fathers. Then we'll look at some actual frameworks for support. And finally, we'll ask, where does the research need to go from here?
All right, so first things first, we need to ground ourselves in the fundamentals. What is grief? And when does this thing that almost everyone goes through become something else, something more persistent?
This is absolutely key to remember. Grieving is not an illness. It's a natural, internal, and very active way of coping when you lose something or someone. And that word process is so important. It's not static. It moves and changes. It's just a fundamental part of being human.
So for most people, the intense pain you feel right after a loss, it does eventually soften. You start to adapt. But here's the thing. For a significant group of people, we're talking somewhere between 4 to 15% of bereaved adults, that acute distress, it just doesn't fade. It sticks around and it can become what's known as prolonged grief disorder, or PGD, where it actually gets in the way of everyday life.
And what I find fascinating is that grief isn't just one single path. It's not one size fits all. Research has shown there are at least 4 different ways it can play out over time. Some folks have low symptoms from the get-go, others start with really intense grief, but they adapt pretty quickly, and then for some, that intense grief can take a long time to resolve, or it might just stay at a high level for a long, long time.
Okay, so with that background, let's zoom in and see how these ideas apply to the very specific experience of terminating a pregnancy due to a fetal anomaly. Because this experience, well, it brings its own set of incredibly unique challenges.
And this is not some rare, isolated thing. In 2023, the rate was over 68 for every 10,000 births. What's more, that number represents the biggest single-year jump since they started keeping records back in 2005. That tells you there's a real and growing need to understand this better.
Now, here's a really key distinction. Unlike a miscarriage or stillbirth, TOPFA involves a choice, an active and often truly agonizing choice. And as the research makes clear, this decision is incredibly complex and filled with ambivalence. That single element, it changes everything about the grieving process that comes after.
So, what you have to understand is that the grief here is layered. It's not just one loss. It's like grieving 2 things at once. Parents are mourning the physical loss of the pregnancy, for sure, but they're also mourning the loss of the child they hoped for, the entire future they had built in their minds. It's a double blow.
All right, now let's shift gears to something that is so important, but often gets completely missed in these conversations: the experience of fathers and male partners.
So if you just look at the numbers on a spreadsheet, the surveys and the scales, it often looks like men are grieving less. They tend to report lower levels of depressive symptoms than their female partners, but that's only half the story.
Because when you actually sit down and listen to men's stories, when researchers do those deep, qualitative interviews, a totally different picture comes into focus. It reveals a grief that is incredibly profound, it's complicated, and it is absolutely not some simple, straight line.
And there's actually a name for this feeling, this gap between what you're feeling on the inside and what the world around you is willing to acknowledge. It's called disenfranchised grief. It's when society basically tells you, either out loud or subtly, that your loss isn't valid and you don't really have the right to grieve it.
And for fathers, this isn't just one layer of feeling unseen. It's compounded. It's layered on top of itself. So they're doubly disenfranchised because society often questions if they should even be grieving at all. They're triply disenfranchised because the healthcare system tends to focus entirely on the pregnant person, making the partner feel invisible. And then they are quadruply disenfranchised because they are almost completely left out of the research on the topic, which just reinforces the whole cycle.
So, with all of this complexity and all of these unique challenges, what can we actually do? What does good, effective support really look like? Well, let's take a look at a couple of frameworks that are grounded in research.
One approach is called the accept model. You can see it's a 5-step process. It starts with simply acknowledging the grief and validating all those complicated feelings. Then you connect those emotions to the loss itself, but in a safe space. A really important step is continuing the bond with the baby, but in a new way that brings comfort. Then it's about exploring thought patterns, and finally learning to tell the story in a new way, creating a narrative that allows for healing.
And for parents who get pregnant again after a TOPFOA, which can be an incredibly anxious time, there's something called the double rainbow approach. It's really clever. It's all about balancing the past with the present. So on one side, you have strategies for honoring the past loss, and on the other, you have strategies for carefully and cautiously embracing the new pregnancy. It's a really powerful tool.
Now, as great as these models are, we have to be honest. There is still a huge way to go. The support systems and the research are just not where they need to be to provide comprehensive and truly effective care for everyone.
So, where are the biggest roadblocks? What's really holding us back from improving the support systems that are out there for families going through this?
Well, the research points to some really critical gaps. For one, the data is messy. We don't even have a consistent way to measure how common PDG is in this group. Most studies also stop way too early, at just 3 months, so we're missing the long-term picture. And this is a big one. There's a serious lack of support designed specifically for partners and for couples as a unit. Plus, we just need more high-quality research in different parts of the world to really test if models like Accept actually work.
So in the end, closing these gaps in the research isn't just about getting better data. It's about answering this one fundamental question. Answering it is the first, most critical step toward building a future where every single person affected by this profound, unique loss gets the validation, the care, and the support they so deeply deserve.